This presentation will be led by Pedro Pinto Coelho, the chairman of the Portuguese FinTech and InsurTech Association, or abbreviated AFIP. He has quite the shelf of awards, at least more than me, right? It's an absolute pleasure to have you to join. You've been in the banking sector for over 25 years, leading also other blue chip organizations across 3 continents, and in multiple roles, right? Multiple leadership roles across, investment banking, wealth management, general management, business development, and now lately in fintech. So the value proposition that he will present today is centered around enabling challenger banks and establishing strategic partnerships with fintechs to create profitable financial products using an open architecture model. The presentation is titled Innovation and Entrepreneurship in the Financial Services System. Thank you for joining us today, Pedro.
Thank you, Pierre Alexander. It's a pleasure.
So, Pedro, if you could impart us on your presentation, and I guess we're good to go.
Very good. Thank you, Pierre. So basically, as we discussed, my idea is to basically answer to some questions that have been quite common on the different webinars that I have been present, and people ask me, the different challenges that we're going to be facing ahead. So one of them is regarding the current environment and how to overcome the complexity of the new environment, and whether the new environment has actually accelerated innovation. And I could say that although the pandemic had some negative effects overall, as we know, particularly on the health sector and on the social interaction, I have to say that regarding innovation in the financial services sector, this was actually a bonus, meaning that the organizations that were left behind, basically because shareholders were a bit concerned about the investment they would have to make, and they would rather get dividends, they were actually forced to support this innovation and the progress of the organization. So whoever has been left behind has been able and was forced to actually catch up during this last year and a half. So we know that the moment the pandemic started, a number of organizations that were ready and that were digital ready were really at an advantage compared to particularly the incumbent banks that were not so well prepared and were relying very much on physical networks, particularly the branch network, to service the client. And as we have seen just now regarding this presentation in Azerbaijan, we saw that there has been a huge movement from what is a physical contact interaction at the branch level to actually having the ability to get the client to actually use the instruments. In some cases, you actually had the instruments, but the clients were a bit reluctant to use it, and they would still come to the branch. Now they were somehow forced to discover some of these tools that the banks already offered, particularly on the payment space. I would say those are the typical tools that nowadays no one really goes to a branch to make any type of payments. And then the onboarding as well, from account opening and documentation. So there are electronic ways of onboarding clients. And we have seen also the ability of the banks in areas where they were actually not that well prepared to really move much faster. And why is that? Because over the last few years, there's been quite a large fintech ecosystem that was created. And this fintech ecosystem has allowed clients, particularly the banks, obviously, to choose from a number of companies that basically already have a program, an app, some system that they could use just by interfacing with their legacy systems. Obviously, the moment they have created an interface, particularly with their core banking system, they will be able to integrate other types of software that ultimately will change the bank profile. And we have seen now more and more sophisticated mobile banking apps, some of them even taking the benefit of open banking by providing services outside the scope of the financial services, for instance, like getting offers from utility services by providing the information that you have in your bank account and then comparing what you could eventually have in terms of alternatives. So that's just one example. But we see a growth in the process that I believe has made the incumbent banks more agile. Just to name basically the process that our colleague from Azerbaijan was mentioning. But I would say that the most relevant aspect is probably the one you don't see. What I mean by this is that it's not only the front end. In order for organizations to be able to quickly reply and answer to the client needs and to have almost an automated way of approaching the client, they have to be very well prepared on the back and middle office. And I think that's where the revolution has taken place, because I would say most banks, I think, had already a pretty good front end. The back end, sometimes they would struggle because they were keeping the legacy processes. So they have really shifted from a legacy process to redesigning sometimes a number of processes to guarantee that it will be just a work-through process that guarantees a quick reply to the client. And the other challenge has to do with the different channels the client uses. So we know that ultimately the client, he can do some of the services in an automated way without human interaction, but sometimes the client requires some support. And it's quite a challenge for a bank to see what channel he's going to use. So nowadays, banks are able to interact with the client either through video conferencing or through a chatbot or through WhatsApp or whatever other instruments you have. And they have to see a unified dialogue, because it's not going to be the same agent that is going to support the client. So again, on the back office, we have to be prepared for all the history that the client provides. So I think. So
Pedro, that I guess that it's a good segue to perhaps the question. You know, what I think you alluded to it with the back end, but what are the key ingredients and you know the limiting factors then to foster innovation in financial services? Is it purely a technology question?
I mean, I think it's more than a technology question. I believe the key ingredients for an organization to really embrace innovation is the environment, the mentality, because as our colleague from Azerbaijan alluded, people are afraid of losing jobs. People are reluctant to work differently from what they worked in the past. So I think that is probably the most relevant challenge. Once the mindset changes, I think things will evolve in a smooth way. However, the way the organizations have been designed also as a requirement by the regulator make it quite a heavy, make it quite heavy for the processes to get done. And if you interact with a startup, it's rather difficult to have control functions, support functions, the front office or the business functions trying to set up some type of business, particularly with a startup. So our recommendation is to actually create a project team to guarantee that they are self-sufficient, because otherwise, if you don't create this project team, it might look easy, but it's not. You have the organization has to have enough confidence to give autonomy also to this project team. And this project team has to have a combination of skills from control, support, and business functions to guarantee that you don't go every time, every step of the process. You don't have to go through the different departments that may be represented in this project team. And this is key, because otherwise it will take a long time to embed the innovation in the bank.
I see that as it's a common pitfall. It's a common trap that very often, digital transformation is done in a corner in a little team, and compliance, procurement, legal, and all the other departments are in their own little island. And yeah, whenever you touch on their, let's say, space, there's actually a bottleneck in in allowing them to innovate. What segments do you see provide the most innovative ideas that banking can adopt or banking can learn from?
I would say in terms of segments, we have seen a huge development on the payment space. That's by far, I would say, the most attractive segment within the fintech world. And we have seen quite a number of disruptive propositions, whether it's buy now, pay later, whether it's remittances, cross-border payments, because as you know, the infrastructure that was in place was really very old-fashioned and very costly. So the clients were very eager to get a much cheaper service. So we now see, cross-border payments becoming cheaper. Initially, this payment company were targeting retail clients. Now they are looking at SME clients as well. And we see some banks, I would say, embracing this in a way that they understand that they cannot go everywhere. So, and they don't have a global network. So some of them are actually teaming up with this pan-European or world even platforms that are able to actually make payments cheaper for these clients. And within the payment space, within Europe as well, we have seen the advent of instant payments. I think instant payments will become a very relevant tool for clients to basically get even cheaper payments almost with no cost, and not have to depend on the Visa or MasterCard networks that obviously are much more costly. So payments is one area. The other area I would say, before I finish, is on the lending space. I think we all know that with the digital world, everyone is creating a digital footprint, and the digital footprint allows us to create, a lot of information that before was not there. So we have all this information that we create every time, every day, and this is a very good tool for also banks to create their credit scoring models, whether it's a retail client or whether it's a company. So I think that is also an area with the support of AI in the future. I'm sure that we will see much better results than the traditional algorithms that we had. And I think these are just two areas, but obviously we've seen innovation across the board. Finally, just one that is also quite relevant is on fighting fraud and AML. So we have seen sometimes some banks struggling with the compliance and just throwing bodies at the problem. But we will see in the near future also artificial intelligence becoming quite relevant and reducing the cost of supervising from a compliance perspective all the transactions that we do every day.
So payments, lending, and fraud management or anti-money laundering seem to be sort of the big spaces that we can learn from. Do you have your eyes on anything that's sort of nascent, brewing at the moment that could be disruptive? For example, like decentralized finance or other industries. Do you see them lending credibility on having a particular focus in perhaps adopting some of those innovative ideas, or are they not legitimate enough yet to be able to have an opinion?
I would say there will be a combination of factors that will create an environment where we as humans and we that are not part, if we are not part of the financial services sector we would like, which is an autopilot model. So I'm very conscious that we are all that we are in these conferences, we are all very fond of this sector. But the people, the common person in the street, they just want to spend some time with their family doing something else and not taking care of their finances. So I really see a huge opportunity as these technologies are combined to basically to offer an autopilot model, whether it's from a savings model or from a wealth management perspective. I will see that more and more clients will rely on this. And I think this will even evolve from a company perspective to have tools that will basically give you recommendations and will make your life much easier. And this will get automation being done with the help of, again, artificial intelligence. So I think artificial intelligence is going to be the key tool that will really create a different environment and help clients and the banks providing solutions at a lower cost and a faster pace.
And so will banks, let's say, if they do not lend, the credibility to these areas of innovation and adopt these models, do you have a warning for them? Do you think that they will perish, they will be acquired, or do you think that these banks will, become more of a sort of a plumbing system underneath, and the engagement layer will be provided by a third party or a platform that will just plug into them? What would you say, or maybe, what's your perspective on this particular?
Yes, that's a very controversial area. Obviously, the banks don't want to be just the plumbing of the system, and they are trying very hard to attract clients with different services, even outside the financial services sector. I think for the time being, clients still believe bank provides security. The moment you have a system that eventually it does eventually replace banks, I think that we would have a problem. I think the advent of central banks creating their own digital currency could become a huge threat for banks, because then what's the point of you having your savings with the bank if you can have it with the sovereign, with the central bank? Then you can do everything else with the best in class. Sometimes the banks may have a nice mortgage proposition, sometimes they don't. So they will have to have much more competition and not apply the typical universal banking model that they have applied over the last few years. So I think there will be a very strong challenge. And I think some of them are trying to go into every direction. And I think the secret might be for you to specialize early on in order not to lose your client base, because if you try to do everything to everyone, I think you might lose your shirt.
Yeah, if I could go directly to the central bank to get my mortgage at negative interest rates, I would be one of it would pay me for my home loan. So Pedro, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights. It was a pleasure to have this fireside chat with you. We'll be moving on to the next.
Thank you, Pierre. It's a pleasure.
So thank you so much for joining, and I hope we'll catch you later. Thank you, Pedro.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.